Hello, and welcome to Transforming Language Education, the vodcast series where we will talk about the future of teaching, inquiry, and advocacy in language education. I'm Jen Crawford.
And I'm Rob Philback. Please like or subscribe if you want to join us in helping to transform language education.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Transforming Language Education. Today, we have Luba Hodges, who is faculty at the International Academy at USC as our guest. And we will be talking today about Luba's experiences in founding a Russian language school in Los Angeles.
Welcome, Luba. Can't wait to hear about this. Again, can you kick us off by telling you sort of what inspired you to start a Russian school in West LA?
Well, what inspired me was my kids, who were at the time when I started thinking about this, at the time they were 5 and 7, and I realized that they needed some structure. Although I'm a teacher and their mom, the authority, they needed to go to school, to be responsible for doing homework and to communicate with other kids in Russian. And I started looking for a Russian school. I did find one school, and my kids went there for 2 or 3 years. And this was very beneficial for them, just the environment itself, the structured environment, and the being immersed in the culture was very beneficial. And I thought, I can probably do it in my way, and I can probably apply some principles from English as foreign language education there, because a lot of kids who are here in Los Angeles, they're not native speakers. Their parents are native speakers, but they were born here and they spoke English was their native language, just like my kids. And I thought, this looks interesting. And then my kids grew up, so I never got to start the school. But then my nephews were of this age when they were ready to go to school, and my family said, okay, start your school already. And that's why I opened it.
So when you said my way,
Mhm.
even though you were appreciative of what your kids were experiencing and being immersed in the culture, what was not working that you thought that you could do better, or what were the principles, concepts that you wanted to bring into that kind of experience?
Well, first of all, what I saw in the school where my children were going to, the school was oriented for children who are native speakers. And my kids are not native speakers. And I thought, and a lot of children were not native speakers. But all the textbooks that were used were published in Russia, and they were published for the kids who think in Russian.
I see.
So what I thought I could do with my school, and that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years, I thought that I could take some elements of a foreign language teaching and incorporate them in school. For example, uh, we we're reading books in my school right now with the advanced group. We're reading like famous Russian classical books, which are not very difficult. But before the kids come to class, they get a list of words with Russian definitions, and we go over the words, and then they do all sorts of exercises where they have to insert words, they have to use words in their sentences. So basically, that's exactly what we do here when we teach English as second language. And we have some other principles that I applied in my school when I opened the school. I decided to focus on the skills, and our classes are focused on reading, writing, speaking, listening, and we have one last class, which is culture. Um, and in every class, we're focused on a specific skill.
That's great.
And this is what my kids did not have in the other school.
Yeah, and that is the school where we met, where your
That's
children
right.
went, and my children went to that school as well. So yes. So how interesting. So you basically took that knowledge that you gained by, your kids being in that school as to them using materials for native speakers, so to say, and decided that wasn't probably the best approach and incorporated ESL into your own school, which is fascinating, of course, because the kids who are who are either raised here or grow up here, they're heritage language learners, right? For them, Russian is a heritage language and not
It
necessarily a
is.
native language. And so we cannot treat those learners as if they are native speakers of Russian, because of course
Mhm.
they're not. And so this is where the second language teaching approaches are helpful. Yeah, so
Extremely.
How often, can you just give us a quick rundown in terms of how many students you have and how often they attend and that sort of thing?
Our school runs on Saturday
Okay,
from 9 to 3, so it's 6 hours. But our academic program is from 10 to 2, only 4 hours.
got it.
This year, last year was 5 hours. But most kids come in the morning at 9, and most kids leave at 3 o'clock. Um, every Saturday, I said, right? How often? What else did you ask me? I'm sorry, forgot.
What kind of population
Oh, how
do you
many
have?
kids, right?
Yeah,
When I started this, and I started this alone, and again, I found two wonderful teachers who I knew before, and I knew that they're great teachers. By the way, from the same school where Katya and I um, were.
Mhm.
Um, when we started, we had 18 kids. At our best year before COVID hit all of us, I had 65 kids.
Wow.
wow.
Now, that's a lot. And now after COVID, it's slowly picking up, but at this moment we have 27.
Mhm.
That's great.
The population is mostly kids from families where Russian is spoken in the family, or at least one parent speaks Russian.
Mhm.
A lot of them have accents. A lot of them, all of them speak English. English is their first language.
Mhm.
That's great. So I know many of our listeners are teachers. Some of them have opportunities to do things like this. I could imagine listeners out there being inspired or maybe already having ideas about perhaps starting a heritage language school or starting some type of program to serve a particular group of learners. You've had this experience. You also had this experience we talked about in our last segment about starting an English language immersion camp in Russia. But based on this experience, I just wonder if there are a few tips that you might want to call out for those listening that might be thinking, I might want to do something like that in my city or neighborhood or
hmm
what have you.
I think that cultural immersion and language immersion, if you want to learn language, is very, very important. And for the cultural immersion, we have a class of culture in my school where we rotate the theme. Sometimes it's Russian composers, sometimes it's Russian painters, sometimes it's Russian literature, classical literature, Russian architecture. So we rotate this, and this is fun. This is introducing to the culture. The parents are fascinated. I remember when we had to move online, and when was the last class, the fifth class, a lot of parents just sit next to their kids and listen to some information about Tchaikovsky. And this again, this was in form of a game. I would start playing the beginning, and the kids, if they knew what it was, they had to raise their hand and just tell me that it was Nutcracker or whatever, Romeo and Juliet. Um, I think parents' involvement is very important. Thank God the parents that we have in my school are very involved. They constantly text me, they ask advice, we have extracurricular activities. Like for example, last December, we all went to see Nutcracker here in Los Angeles, and this was amazing. all these little kids, and we studied Tchaikovsky before in class last year and the beginning of this year, so they recognized all these melodies. And this was I remember we were sitting in the theater and I was sitting behind. We bought 2 rows, and every time they would start playing some, I don't know, Spanish dance or Russian dance, the kids would look back. And I was sitting in the back. They would look back and they would say, Russian dance, Spanish dance. So they were very proud, and the parents were very happy and that the kids knew this. So I think that extracurricular activities are important. We have picnics, we celebrate traditional holidays, and we, of course, encouraged everybody to speak only Russian. That's why I kind of took that approach of the immersion program from the camp that I organized in Moscow. I brought it here to the school.
That is absolutely fascinating, and it's interesting that those what you learned about the interest that kids develop, what you learned during your early career years back in Moscow, you were able to bring it with you and transform it and apply it to the Russian setting here in LA. Really, really awesome. And the idea that you're using content like learning about music or learning about culture to actually teach them language, that's also really fascinating. And that, of course, brings up interest in the learners and the parents. When there is interest, that is a big part.
Yeah, I agree. The theme that comes through all of our conversations with you clearly is this idea of, what is it going to take to create this real serious motivation, investment, obsession around a language and its culture. And you exhibited that yourself in your own language learning experience, but clearly through these other venues and in this current endeavor, in this Russian heritage language school, you're really exhibiting that. So
that's really amazing.
That is true. Culture is extremely, extremely important, but also people who are passionate about what they do. And I'm very lucky to have a great team when they're very inspirational. So it's great. I think it's a combination.
That's great. Yeah, well, thank you for your time, for joining us and sharing your experiences. Extremely illuminating, and I know helpful for so many out there that are watching. So thank you so much. I'm Rob Philback.
Katya Moore. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Luba. Till next time.
Thank you very much.